Hello and welcome to the Münster Podcast. I'm your host Charles, and I'm also here with Ben,
Hello.
Isaac,
Hi.
and Alfie.
Hi.
We are missing one, Tyler, but he is gone to
Dead.
go. This is our first episode, and we are starting with a tier list of historical figures and leaders. Originally, we were going to do it purely on leadership, but you will see a few people here that have sort of stretched that definition.
Big
And
adult.
as a result, we will see how it goes. We have 50 people here, and there's a tier list. So we'll get started with the first one, which is Winston Churchill. What do we think about this one, guys?
Well,
Quite a divisive one.
my big problem with him was that he still failed his he failed an election and he only got brought into power for the first time, on an emergency whim. So, the people didn't fully support him clearly.
I think that an important thing that you're gonna have to avoid overlooking is the main good thing about Winston Churchill is that he won the Second World War.
Yeah, I mean, he did go against all odds and all advice. Did it basically on his own for a while before everyone started going on board with him. I think you have to have some sort of grit to do that, to be honest.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean, everybody said that he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. So, but then he obviously did it. That takes, like a certain amount of character and leadership. Easily one of the most important figures in all of history, I'd say. Like, I definitely put that out there right now.
Yeah.
There is a reason that he's considered to be a pillar of British culture in the pre-modern era.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the greatest of all time. I think that goes to he's definitely one of the greatest.
So you want to put him in X?
Regardless of what everything that before that he's done. So even though he did fail in the Navy and the Army and whatever else.
Well, he didn't really fail in it. He ended up with a ridiculous. He was a high-ranking Navy officer when he was in office.
Well, the quality of life under him, it wasn't amazing. I mean, obviously, the war affected that, but like when he was, trying to contain it and make it as good as possible, like obviously in the hard circumstances, he didn't do a particularly amazing job. Obviously, he was probably preoccupied with the war, but he kind of felt like he neglected like other aspects of the country, which even with the excuse of war doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, but you have to know that at the time, it was total war.
Yeah, yeah.
He really did. Well, the country as in general had to divert all possible resources towards the war. You weren't really given a choice. So that is a incredibly difficult situation to be in anyway, and he did handle it very well.
Yeah.
I mean, his speeches are known.
I mean, yeah, they're even at the beginning of songs. There's an Iron Maiden
exactly.
song with it in.
You probably know a few off by heart.
I know his "We Will Fight Them on the Beach" speech pretty much by heart. That was everybody knows bits of his speeches, but then some of the he brought in quite a few socialist leaning reforms. Obviously, like if you do English in the UK, you learn about Inspector Calls, which is set just before before World War II, and shows the socialist reforms that were needed and wanted by the public. And he brought those in, but they did then after the war. Obviously, the economy had a big boom, and they weren't really as necessary, which is probably why he didn't win the second election. So, I think if you look at his policies for actual controlling his own country, like Ben said, the actual quality of life under him probably wasn't as good. But then that wasn't his leadership. His leadership was a powerful figurehead to get us through a war.
I don't think anyone else could have done it.
No. Well,
I
Chamberlain
I
failed.
can't think of anyone else who could have done it. No one else could have done it.
If Chamberlain had stayed on throughout the whole war, I imagine that the outcome, we would have relied more heavily on America and the rest of the powers, and I think our involvement, we wouldn't have been the plucky little country that we were under Trump. Under his
Under
leadership.
Trump.
No.
Right. So, where are we
Oh,
putting him?
I
Then?
think you have to take his more liberal policies, as you were calling them, with a grain of salt, because he definitely was a huge advocate for imperialism, and
was.
that is in many ways on the opposite side of the spectrum.
So is he an S class or an A class? Where is he?
I say
That's
say
a bit of a
S.
leading question, isn't it?
Okay, fine. Is he an A class or an S class then?
I'll say S because purely because the war was a very important. You know, we'd not be speaking German basically if it wasn't for him.
I think that A is a more suitable spot because,
think
for
A.
one, that expression doesn't make any sense. How much German do they speak in France?
You know what I meant? If we'd have lost the war, we would
Yeah,
all be
but-
speaking German.
Right, we're all assuming victory.
That really isn't
of-
how language spreads.
Yeah,
I think
okay,
it should go in A.
Yeah, I think it should go in A. I don't.
I mean, we
think
can
that-
always change it later. But I think he goes in an A. I think he goes in A. I
I'd
think he
say
goes. I think he goes. in
I'll
A.
take
I think
A or S.
He's right. I know earlier I was making it out to be like he was an incredibly perfect prime minister or whatever, but you seriously cannot ignore the stuff that he did before the war and also the stuff he did after the war,
Yeah.
because he did become prime
he
minister
left it in ruin.
in the 50s, and that was a particularly divisive term. You can decide if that was a good term or not. And then obviously the stuff before the war, South Africa, India, Gallipoli, you can't ignore that and be like, oh well, he got better later because he seriously messed up in those areas, like really badly.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd agree.
So
with
are we happy with? Are we happy?
I'll go for A.
Yeah, we'll go for it. We can change it later. Next we have
that. Oh god.
That took 7
angry
minutes.
mustache man Adolf Hitler.
Well, this
I'm-
is an easy one.
I'm gonna straight away say C for me personally.
Yeah. I was thinking about the C to D area.
He was good
Yeah,
at the
I-
manipulation, but he
C
wasn't
or-
so good at the winning or the leading. If
Well,
we completely exclude the morals of his leadership, just on
Yeah, I
leadership
mean-
itself.
I think people. Right, this is gonna sound like a really weird statement. Put this out of context, and it's weird. Hitler is overrated.
bruh.
Okay, I am seriously tired of people being like, oh, he was evil, but he's really, really clever. I don't think he was.
He wasn't that, if he was clever, he would have won.
Yeah, because wasn't he put in an emergency?
Yeah, but
Because-
he
Went
basically
for-
how Hitler rose to power was he did get himself. I believe he got elected as chancellor or something. I'm not familiar with German political positions.
He got elected as chancellor and then
Took over
changed-
Tower building.
as
he-
emergency
he
powers.
used
Yeah, they got
loopholes
outfit.
in the law to give himself emergency
They
powers.
bombed.
and then he
They
took
bombed
over.
the their Capitol building, and then he said he blamed it, and said that this is a state of emergency. Got granted emergency powers, and then just overtook the government.
Yeah, I mean those few months from 1932 to like early 1933. Okay, that does show that he was an incredibly intelligent leader, right? But a lot of it was kind of lucky, to be honest, given the circumstances of Germany at the time and the world. Also, he was incredibly lucky, and then also two things that I think discredit any of that rise to power is. First of all, towards the end of World War II, he completely lost it, could not keep it together, and
Well,
whilst I don't think Germany could have won the war, I think that they could have put up a better fight if he didn't just ruin everything. And second of all, also, he just wasn't a very good leader anyway. Okay, he had an incredibly irregular sleeping pattern. He would frequently never show up to meetings, frequently not show up to meetings, which would lead his staff to be completely confused. They would have no idea what to do, and they would implement policies and do work that they believe that Hitler might like,
I
rather
remember.
than what he actually wants.
Yeah, I remember all of his, even the higher ups in his own army, were more looking to please him rather than strategize. I remember reading that he would wake up in the morning and threaten to kill guards if they didn't get his like breakfast order in straight away. So he wouldn't, if there was somebody like waiting to give him like important news about the current status of the war, say he woke up at like 3 p.m. and they were like, oh, Hitler, the Russians, they're coming in, and he go, yeah, but I want my apple strudel.
Yeah, I seriously think that is such an important thing. Also, he did not build the autobahn.
Yeah.
That is a huge misconception. He did not build the autobahn.
I tell you what, he did build. Well, he didn't build it. He helped build the Volkswagen Beetle.
It
We
built-
need to make sure that we get like a concrete list of successes of his to contrast with the failures.
That
Actually,
aren't.
the interesting about the Volkswagen Beetle though, that was also like a myth. He promised. So basically, he shut all the trade unions down and said, join this state-sponsored trade union, this massive one. And he also said, if you work really hard, we'll give you a free Volkswagen Beetle. Do you know how many people got Volkswagen Beetles?
1.
0. Nobody got any. It was a massive lie.
Well, he had one.
Well, obviously he had one, but he wasn't part of the union. He's he's at the top, isn't he? So even that, even though whilst it may sound like a good idea, well, he did use it to lie, and like, come on.
He was manipulative. But the thing is, he didn't. Some people think of Hitler, he was just an angry guy in Germany who was just on the streets and he rose to power. There was a group of people originally, who they believed in the Aryan superiority, with Aryan actually originally being like a mythical race almost. Like it wasn't a real thing. And there was a group of people who believed in this, and they actually went to these little underground meetings. And I believe he was I can't remember what he was doing down there. Hitler ended up at one of these meetings by accident and got really pissed, like really drunk, and ended up giving a speech. And then these guys who were in this group saw him and actually picked him out. And I believe they compared him to Jesus Christ. They actually compared him to like the new savior.
That's a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but they compared him to the new savior. It was something like that. I think they called him the Messiah, and then that's where then he started hiring mercenaries, and then that's where the Nazi Party came from, and then that's where the rise, and then that's where he got arrested, and then when he got out of prison, and then it went from there.
Have any of you read Mein Kampf before?
Bits, not all.
Yeah, it's not a good read. It's really terribly written.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
He'd be an author then. We wouldn't be the leader. He'd just be doing
If Hitler's Mein Kampf had sold better, he'd be an author.
It might have sounded a bit more sophisticated in German.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's translation
that
issues.
That also. But where are we going? So after all this,
I think.
where is he going? I think
C or D?
I think you should go on D because you said that he was pretty good at manipulating his people, but how much success did he actually get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, he still ended up shooting himself in the head, so.
he did lose the war.
Yeah,
He did
exactly.
lose the war, and it was his fault.
Well, it was his war.
It was his war. It was his war, and it's his fault that he lost. I also think D. I thought it might be a C because his rise to power in the 30s is quite
Impressive.
incredible.
It's impressive, yeah. But
Is incredibly impressive, but he's an idiot.
Yeah, and
It's,
that's completely excluding moral objections. That's just looking at him as a power, as just actually coming to his position. You know.
like getting power is one thing, but what you do with it is.
Yeah, he was just irresponsible with it. He got it and then didn't know. It was almost like he hadn't actually planned getting to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, by a reason. Oh, you know what? Let's kill all these people. Oh, fuck.
Oh, right, I'm here now. What do I do?
What
Yeah.
do I do? Oh, best just kill a whole race. You know what? That.
But that is pretty much how he treated his leadership, to be fair. He literally just was like, backed out orders as he thought of them on the spot.
Let's stabilize the nation. What should we do? Oh, fuck it. Put them all in the chambers. Yeah.
Right, so next we have Hitler's biggest rival, Joseph Stalin. So where does he go?
Father.
It was ridiculous. Once again, ridiculously good at manipulation. Really good at censorship. He led by fear, but he was a strong figurehead. But then he did drive himself insane to the point where I think one of his last written quotes was, "I have got to a point where I no longer trust myself." He got that paranoid that he didn't trust himself.
I would like you to explain how one can be good at censorship.
Well, he wasn't he? Well, okay, he wasn't good at it,
anyway,
but
though,
it was one of his.
You can use it a lot. But
Yeah.
Does that make you good at it?
It's not like a skill you can be good or bad at.
Well,
though, is it?
he was. I tell you what. Well, okay, not necessarily good at censorship. He was good at using censorship, and like with secret police forces and things like that. A bit like what the Nazis had, but not Nazi.
I think that is not a good leadership because
No.
if you are a leader, you want a genuine backing from your subjects.
But if you're a dictator, you
and
don't need it.
false. But and then again, that is a dictator, and I think that is a flawed leadership.
And even
form.
though he had no support, well, he had some, just limited, real support.
Well,
He still held his position for his whole life.
yeah, actually, yeah. Well, I mean, you can talk about how effective he was or whatever, but he still managed to keep his position. Yes, he did kill millions of people along the way,
Which gets
Also,
ignored a lot.
Yeah. I mean, also stained his old friend's reputation, then murdered his other friend. But he did
What a
keep his
guy.
position all the way until 1950. 1953.
Although, if you look at the original, the next on the list, Lenin, when he died, he was asked. Well, when he was about to die, he was asked by a high up member of the party, "Who shall replace you?" And he said, "Anybody but that Stalin guy." And then
Well, I think that says enough actually.
yeah,
How successful he was, the Stalin.
Shad.
they picked, and then
He
I
didn't
think
do
they ended up picking
very
a
well
random role.
He didn't do very well for the actual idea of communism of the men that came before him.
No, he reformed it to himself.
Yeah. As an individual, he did whatever he wanted, and he got it. I think he.
It was nothing like the any of the Bolsheviks' ideas, really.
Well, that really does defeat the point of what he was supposed to be doing, because if you were meant to have a system like communism, where it is meant to be hierarchyless, and if you have someone at the top with that amount of absolute power, then you just contradicted the entire idea.
I think we can all agree that he was okay, not great. Should we say like a B or a C?
No, he's not a C though. You can't disrespect him like that.
All right, well,
Okay, because he did also have to fight in the war, and he did win it as well.
yeah, he massively helped with World
The
Wars.
thing is with Stalin that makes him different to pretty much most of these leaders, even the murderous dictators, is that he was not willing. He was willing to have a lot of people die for one thing, and the thing is that he still managed to do it.
Is that good leadership, though? Is it worth the deaths of that many people to peddle your agenda?
Yep.
To him?
Yeah. To him, yeah, and it also worked because the thing that killed him was he had a stroke. He didn't get assassinated. He didn't kill himself. He didn't resign. He had a stroke and pissed himself and died.
Big artery burst.
Yeah, nobody killed him. I guess you could make an argument for what was Stalin's legacy, where it was nothing because he literally left nothing because he just sat in his country mansion in the woods, busting a nut all the time, right? So I mean, literally, the months after Stalin's death was complete chaos. But you know what I mean. He
I
lasted
think
ages.
You should go on C.
Yeah,
should go on
I'm
C.
saying B.
I'm gonna say B as well. Ben, what is you are the deciding vote?
Oh, why? I'd say he scrapes a B.
Alright.
He scrapes a B. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna put him in. We're gonna put him in B then. Okay. Any last objections?
Go on, man.
I just
Right.
want to stroke his mustache.
Next, we have not Hitler's, Stalin's also other rival, is Lenin. And where does he go? He's like the godfather of Marxism. So where does he go?
Actually had support. He created a movement. I mean, he was involved in the assassination of the Tsar. I think. My history right there? It was his rise
yeah.
up, wasn't it? Yeah. It was his.
It was the second revolution.
Yeah.
That took over.
So yeah, he actually had the power behind him. He united the country, a massive country, against, to them, a negative leader.
I mean,
But that's
he did
debatable.
have to fight. He did have to fight in a civil war, which is one of the most brutal and bloody wars in all of human history. He'd have to fight in the Russian Civil War, and it did look like he was going to get absolutely destroyed because not only did he have to fight the White Russians, he also had to fight the Allies, the Entente. He had to fight the Entente and the Japanese. So, and he somehow managed to win. I mean, there are various reasons why he won. That is not just Lenin, but in the end, he was the person who led through that.
At any rate, that is a lot of fighting and
that is a
winning
lot of
to do.
fighting. There's a lot of bloodshed.
He had the leadership to unite a country, which is hard to do.
Yeah, but he had to fight that civil war. So did he really unite it? Because there was a lot of White Russians, and actually at the beginning of the war, it didn't look like it was. No one actually expected it to be such a terribly large and bloody war.
Well, I think everybody.
Surely you can't pin it all down to luck.
Yeah.
There still has to be some skill involved there.
Right. So for like a vague idea, whereabouts does he go? Is he higher than Stalin?
Yeah.
He should be higher than Stalin, and he should be on B.
Yeah, it's almost like we need a little like half B, half A thing because he
Do we
should be
have to move
higher.
Stalin down.
Yeah,
No, I think we should knock Stalin down to C and put Lenin above him.
Or we could just like put him like before Stalin, so like B plus.
Like that.
Yeah, eventually you have B plus and a B minus. Makes.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think-
alright with putting Lenin before Stalin like that.
but
Yeah.
but we've not done
Right,
that for everyone
we-
else. Like they're not in an order there. Like just knock Stalin down to a C. It's still a good grade.
Right, we'll have to see who else we put in C then.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? We'll have to see how the rest of this pans
so we
out.
can compare them. Yeah.
Okay, right.
we can always move him back up.
With only 4 people, it goes Hitler, Stalin, Lenin, Churchill. That order I like, but then when we start putting everyone else in, it might change completely.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
let's.
so next we have Clement Attlee.
I know nothing.
He won the election against Winston Churchill during the Second World War,
That's about as much as my knowledge goes.
and he was the there's incredible generalization, and some people will probably be unhappy with me saying this, but he is the equivalent of Jeremy Corbyn in that period. So he was more radical left than most left like wing party members, the Labour Party MPs, and then he created the NHS.
Did he also create like those bunch of national insurance acts as well?
Yeah, so he basically created the welfare state in the United
Yeah.
Kingdom.
Okay. At any rate here, you have to appreciate the creation of the NHS, whether you
Yeah.
hate or like the guy. That one thing is probably his most important.
He had a lot of important roles. Obviously, he was prime minister, which is the most important role, arguably, that you can get to in British politics. But not only that, he was the lead. He was the head of the Labour Party from 1935 to 1955, which is a large span. Then he became. Before that, he was a deputy leader of the Labour Party. He was deputy prime minister for a term, Lord President of the Council, Secretary of State for Dominion Affairs, Lord Keeper of the Privy Seal, Postmaster General, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for War, Member of the House of Lords for
God, how
a
long
number
has
of
this guy
years.
been around for?
I know, Member of Parliament for the Member of Parliament twice. Apparently, according to this, he had 1,000,001 roles, and then he was the Defence Secretary as well.
Yeah,
So he's obviously got what it takes to be a leader.
That is a man who is determined to serve his country.
Wasn't
Yeah, I think there's a lot to appreciate about him. If you talk to any incredibly dedicated Labour supporters, this man is the Jesus Christ for the Labour Party, and I can see why. To be honest,
Didn't he oversee the massive? Oh, I can't remember what it's exactly called, but it was like in the Indian and Pakistan war, in which it caused like that separation.
I think so. Yeah.
Mm.
I think another thing that gets swept under the rug is his time in the War Cabinet during the Second World War as well. He was a bit woolly in where he stood in the War Cabinet, but I think the fact that he served there as well, it has to show that the politicians did trust him.
Obviously, a lot of people trusted him to be in a position of power because he was, in what I read out, he was voted into a lot of positions of power. So I would argue that he's probably had more important roles to play. even if they were quieter roles, that aren't in the public eye, more important roles than Churchill. So I just think he should be on an A with Churchill because he had those important roles.
Are we putting Clement Attlee higher than Lenin, Stalin, and Adolf Hitler?
Yes.
He
Because-
definitely goes higher than Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. I think he should be in an A or a B. I'll go B because
Is nobody pushing for the S class?
I think we should go B.
I'll say
S
B.
class is reserved for people who are very
Like
impressive.
legendary status.
Yeah.
Yeah, he obviously creation of NHS, obviously brilliant, but he you couldn't put him up with Churchill.
You've got to put
He's
it.
good.
You've got to put it in context of other things. He didn't win a war. Churchill won the war. World War II, largest war we've had on being involved in. It's not really something that it's easy to compare to. So as important as he should stay on a B.
Yeah, but if we're talking context, then we need to look at Clement Attlee's context too, because his introduction of a welfare state was incredibly radical, and he found it very difficult to push it through, not only to establish it, but also to maintain it, because the amount of opposition to the establishment of the welfare state, and especially the NHS, was incredibly large. It was huge, and he managed to put up with that and keep it alive.
I'm still sticking at a B.
I think he goes before Churchill, but I think he gets into an A.
Right. Well, let's take a vote. I'm going B. Isaac,
I think you should go at B.
Ben.
He
4
barely
is not
scraped
a
B for
rank.
me.
B. Right. Okay.
He barely scrapes a B.
Mm.
Wait, you wanted to put him in C?
No, I'd put him in B, but he'd be like, I'd put him under Lennon.
It could change. It depends how many, because we might decide that, depending on who goes into which one. All right, my favorite, Ronald Reagan time.
We have Ronald Reagan.
I'm saying S.
I don't think there's S, really.
S,
No.
yeah. A at least.
Big Dick Reagan.
A. He was just, for a start, he was lovable. Everyone loved Reagan. The country wasn't divided.
Did everyone really love Reagan though?
Yeah.
I don't think
He was
everybody
just-
did.
Maybe not on his
If you were lower
policies.
class and African American, would you love Reagan? I don't
But
think you
no,
would.
not on his policies, but he was a likable guy. He
I
was
think
funny.
The policies that come from a person are reflective of their character, and if people don't like someone's policies, it is unlikely that they will also like that person as well.
I tell you what, his wife, Nancy Reagan, who was obviously part of his politics throughout the years, she did a lot of work on, like stopping drug, stopping drug cultures, I suppose would be the easiest way of putting it, under his guidance, and he also did a lot on that. And a lot of people like to look back at them now, and there's a few videos on where they did like information speeches on marijuana. So, and they were saying, it's probably really dangerous. But they didn't know the effects then. And he was actually, what he was trying to do was, a lot of the lower income citizens in America at the time were going to end up getting addicted to new imported drugs. Like, obviously drugs spring up all the time. And so I think he definitely cared about both ends of the, income sheet in America. And he did, the economy was pretty good under him. He was a strong leader, and he was great with foreign policy, interacting with other world leaders, making peace, making negotiations, working out what's best for America and other countries. He was incredible at that, and I don't think there's been a president that's as good as interacting with foreign heads than Reagan was.
It's important to consider that in the era in which he was elected president, the actual political landscape was dominated by foreign policy anyway.
But I still don't think that there's been a stronger foreign, not foreign president who was as strong with foreign interactions as Reagan was.
I think we get a bit of a Hitler effect here, and what I mean by that is, he looks better than, like his character his character is louder than what he actually did.
Yeah,
know what I
I
mean?
know.
Do you
I
know
know
what I
what you
mean by
mean,
that?
and I
So
get you. but but it's not completely like that. Like, yeah, he was a charismatic president. He was one of the most charismatic people we have had. I mean, it was the same with Nixon. Nixon won through being a charismatic. Well, Nixon wasn't very charismatic, but he sprung a chord with the average American. Nixon was very white, middle-class American, and I think Reagan probably was as well, but he obviously managed to tap in to some kind of audience in America. And he was very good at that.
I don't think he goes higher than a C.
At least a B.
No, I can't put him above Stalin.
He bombed Libya. No, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't put him above a C.
Come on, he needs
I
to be in a
thought
B.
that he should go on B.
Yeah, I say B. Ben?
what do you think?
I would agree with Charles and say C.
We've got a
Right,
2v2.
someone has to change their mind then. I know at the start we were like, oh yeah, let's not do it based on their like morals or whatever. But considering that he is a democratically elected president, you have to take into account the way he treated certain like people.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go out and be like, oh, he's racist, oh, he's this or whatever. We're not gonna go there. This isn't the point for that, and also I don't believe that anyway. But the way he did handle American, so I mean North and South American foreign policy, also the way he handled the drugs issue, the war on drugs, and also the AIDS epidemic. Well, all three of those things. Maybe at the time it looked all right, but we can look back at it now, and we can look back and say that all three of those things
Social context
are
changes.
still not great.
Social context changes, though. You know, if you look back at Abraham Lincoln's time, it was still perfectly socially acceptable to own a black man. And now we look back on that and go, that was horrible. That was a horrible time. That's an oppressive time. That's not acceptable. But it was then. And if you were brought up in the, under Abraham Lincoln's rule before the prohibition of slavery, you would have been taught that it was socially acceptable. You wouldn't know what was wrong with that. And I think it's okay now to look back on some of Reagan's policies and say, well, that's slightly off. That's not how I remember it being. But in reality at the time, it probably wasn't viewed on as that was probably the majority of the opinion was agreed with. Well, I mean, it was because it was the president. The majority of the opinions in America agreed with how Reagan policies were.
He ended his presidency with a 68% approval rating, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still
that is quite high, but you do have to bear in mind that 32% of Americans is still a lot of people.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
but
people.
social context changes. So all I'm saying is that at the time, some of the views obviously aren't going to be perfect when we look back at it. You need to take that into account when you think about it.
Does social context affect how he dealt with something like the AIDS crisis, though? Because that is always going to stand out. That's always going to stand out.
But
Because
once again,
the issue,
Social context is almost always relevant. You can never remove something from its context and still make full sense of it.
bearing in mind this was a new thing sprung onto the American public. Like this was AIDS, a big thing. They didn't.
Yeah, but he didn't really
He just
want to
ignored
talk about it. He didn't want to do anything with it.
Yeah.
And that, like,
Is that good leadership?
is that good? Yeah, exactly.
See, the thing is,
I mean,
though,
you
that
can make
probably
cases for
wasn't
both sides for that, but I think that's
wasn't
poor.
directly from him. That will have been advisors saying that, either saying things like, "We don't know enough about this. There isn't. If we say something, we risk saying something completely wrong and absolutely
well. I mean,
messing the
You
situation
can
up."
say that anything he
you
does
can
was
say that
just
for all the
advisor.
leaders, though. I mean, I'm sure Churchill's advisors said you need to start talking to Italy for peace. You need to start talking to Mussolini as an intermediary with Hitler. We need peace now. I'm sure that's what they told him, but he didn't want to do anything. He wanted to do his own thing.
I'm still solid on a B, because whether you like his policies, like whether you agree or think that he's some of the things. I mean, once again, he's not perfect. He will have handled some situations different to how we would, but he was a strong leader. He had a high approval rating, especially like Isaac said at the end of his thing. So he was a constant constantly approved of. Like people were agreeing with him. He knew how to once again, you can't just brush off how he dealt with foreign leaders, not necessarily foreign policy, but with the actual leaders. Like the Cold War fear was still quite high in America. So he was talking to Russian leaders, talking to I believe he went to communist China, I think, at one point, didn't he? And he was just good at interacting with foreign and obviously he improved British-American relations a lot with Thatcher. Him and Thatcher were constantly trading deals with each other, conversing on political ideas and such.
I think you changed your mind. I think it goes B. Yeah,
Dabbed.
I agree now. Yeah, B.
All right.
B.
Any objections?
No.
Right, and then we have his best friend, Margaret Thatcher.
No.
So where does she go? And this is obviously, first of all, she's already an incredibly divisive character, but also because we are from the north of England, we, maybe we should hate her, but I mean that is up to you. So where does she go? Where does she go?
Alfie
I think
is definitely going to bring up the Falklands War. I absolutely, I'm 100% sure that he will do that, and he will use that as a reason that she was good.
Right.
But you can't ignore her domestic policy. It is just completely wrong to ignore the domestic policy in favour.
I'm not going to say that she's going to be in an A or an S, but I think if we've put Reagan on B, we have to put her on B, because once again they worked closely together, and she helped the British economy. We were in I don't know if we were in the recession, but the economy was struggling heavily.
She lowered inflation but rose unemployment, and the thing about that is, which is worse? The economy with her, but her foreign policy with America, interacting with Reagan, she was very traditional. She was a traditional. Well, in some sense she was traditional, but in some sense she wasn't, because obviously she was a first woman prime minister. And she was a housewife originally, and then she joined politics. But she wanted to fix the issue, like long-standing issues in Britain, and she did that with like close negotiation with Reagan, trading between the two countries, political ideas, like I said, and then obviously she shut the mines, completely, killed the coal mining industry in England, which was not good, especially like you say, around us. A lot of cities around us were their entire economy of that city was based on mining. I think it was Newcastle. Literally, at one point, was just all miners. I think it was Newcastle anyway.
Yeah, so that raises a question. Was that necessary? Because
probably.
Because I guess you could look at it in the sense that somebody had to do it. Somebody had to tell these people this really bitter pill to swallow. It's incredibly, to be honest, it is incredibly brutal. I mean, these people have nowhere else to go, by the way, if you shut down the mines. But it's 50 years later, did it work? And I think I'm gonna say I'm closer to saying no than yes, to be honest.
I think that if she didn't do that, then it would have happened. It would have had to happen later on, because the longer that you allow an issue like that to continue for, then the worse it is going to get.
Well, she was, like you say, someone has to do it, and because the issue with the problem that people have with it is a glaring problem. The mass unemployment from such a move. That is a big problem, so people look at that and then immediately just go to, no, that was a bad thing to do, that was terrible, all those people out of jobs. But then somebody had to do it, and people are going to look at that mass unemployment, and that's why they hate her. That's why they think she was a bad leader, based on that one thing. But somebody had to do it.
Reason.
No,
because
but some people will
put a lot of work into reducing the power of the UK's trade unions, which I'm sure many working class people resent.
I mean, I'm not saying she was perfect, and I don't know every single policy that she was that she had, but I think in the long run, her power. I think you have to put her on a B with Reagan. She has to be with Reagan because they were working together. She did do what needed to be done, and I don't know if it was her that said it or somebody said it about her, but there was a quote about her saying that she didn't do what people liked. She did what people had to be done, not what people. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I think also another thing that she did quite well was, and you mentioned, we're not going to get too into it because you might jizz in your pants, but Falklands War, you do have to talk about that because actually
We
the
can't
Americans,
completely ignore it, but we just need to avoid letting war.
we have to let it
overshadow
overtake the entire thing. But she did something similar to what Winston Churchill did. The Americans said to her, "Please don't go to war against Argentina,"
And
then she did it anyway. Also, the embassy siege in London, the Iranian embassy siege, if it wasn't for her, probably more people would have died. Probably more people would have died, because she did not want to negotiate with them. Really, are we putting her in B? I think it sounds like we're going to put her in B.
Right. Ben, what do you think?
I just have like one more point about.
I think she should go at C.
Okay.
Can we allow Ben to make his?
Thanks.
Ben, I have 1 point.
Yeah. No, I have 1 point, Isaac. Oh, we should put her in B. Thanks, Isaac. Right. Well, under Margaret Thatcher's power, that she reformed the education system. So what it was originally is you used to have to do this test at age 11, which was quite a very unfair test. You'd essentially be, from this results, you'd be put into 3 schools. If you passed the test, you'd go into basically the intelligence school. They'd be like, oh, you'd become the businessmen, the doctors, the lawyers. You'd go to the normal school, where it was like you'd probably learn more labor jobs. And you'd go to basically 1%, which was like an apprenticeship thing. But it was basically like a very just normal apprenticeship, but it wasn't quite as developed as it is like today. She basically reformed that. She said, look, this test is bullshit, because quite frankly it was. You couldn't, like, I've gone over the test, looked at it. It was a tough test to take at like my age, but like at 11 years old, and on like one specific day, it could decide which school you went to, which made no sense. So what she then did is she'd put in a bunch of policies, and she made it what they call the marketization of schools. Essentially what it was is schools would compete to get the best kids to get more money, and that would therefore help schools better develop students.
It's an incentive.
It's an incentive, and it also made it a lot easier for like people who maybe might have had a bad day on that test. It made basically not eliminate, but it made it less likely for that to happen. Through this reformation, it made it much easier for like employment and stuff, and it didn't mean that people were excluded from getting their jobs. As long as they worked in that system, they could properly, get to those higher jobs that they may want, irregardless of what school they went to. Well, not irregardless, but it wouldn't have as much effect as if the normal system. So I've always liked Thatcher for how she reformed it. Obviously, it's not without its flaws, but I've still always appreciated how she did that, because I feel like if she hadn't have done that and the education system had stayed the same as like what it is today, I don't think we'd even really know each other. I feel like at 11 years old, when you don't really care that much, to put this
you don't know to care, do you?
Yeah, you put this test in front of people and go, this will determine your future, was a flawed system. So I've always respected her for that.
She made a lot of moves like that. I believe it was her that privatised the train lines, which obviously creates competition in the market, which helped.
Yeah, I think it's with things like that though, we can look back on it now and think did it work or not. So I mean, has it worked?
I mean,
I
yeah,
think the reformation of education.
A lot of the
is very good.
policies have worked, but I think we need to take into account the things she has supported that we would look back and think that they don't work. For example, she supported a poll tax,
Yeah.
which means that if you don't know, that everybody, no matter what their income is, pays the same amount of money. So you could have someone on minimum wage per year, and they will pay the same amount of tax as a billionaire.
Right, I think Thatcher should go where Reagan goes. Wherever Reagan goes, Thatcher goes with.
I
because I
think-
think they're basically the same.
we just need to stick them on B because they're not bad, but they're not the top of the top. You know, they're somewhere in the middle, leaning on good.
She definitely should not go on A.
No, I think B. B is a solid Thatcher.
I think she was a solid B. Like she was. I think she was very hit and miss what she did.
Right, Bonaparte, where did he go?
He was a strong leader. He was, but then he died.
He got quite far, and he did after getting exiled, just fucking pop up again.
Yeah, he was determined. Like he was. You couldn't shit on him.
I think he's S class. I'm gonna throw that out there. I think he's an S class. You guys can fight about it, but I believe he's an S class.
I mean,
You can't convince me otherwise that he's an S class. I mean, why wouldn't he be an S class? His
I'd say
downfall
A.
at the end wasn't his fault.
yeah, he did.
Okay, that battle at Waterloo, he should have won, but for some reason it rained. Okay, and that messed up all his plans. Okay, and also if
But
the
then
Prussians didn't come to help him to help Wellington, he would have won. Really, so, if we speak, even though we had a setback of not being able to position his artillery properly because it rained.
But that's a lot
Those
of ifs.
things did happen though. You have to
Yeah.
take into account that
Should an S tier leader be brought down by rain?
I don't think
what I'm trying to say,
what
what I'm trying to say is that he could have gone on for longer. And the argument, I know none of you said it, but you might. The argument that he failed at the end because he lost the battle, I don't think that's really works because the loss of the battle wasn't all his fault. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I understand what you mean by that.
But up until that point, I mean, he was incredibly successful.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody ever conquered Europe in the same way that he did until Hitler.
Yeah, and well.
And this man deleted the HRE.
I mean, I've always got respect to man who can
Yeah,
do it,
we
honestly.
can't say that is
Right,
a bad
that is
thing.
br- that is
Dismantled the
genuinely brilliant.
HRE. Okay, he dismantled the HRE, conquered all of Iberia, went all the way to Egypt and was like, oh, I'll have this too. Took all of that, walked all the way to Moscow, along the way, destroyed the Habsburgs. I mean, this man's done it all.
Yeah.
The only thing he couldn't do is fight the British, I suppose, but there were certain points during the Napoleonic, the coalition wars where Britain looked like it could lose, and it did it a few times.
Yeah, I do agree with you saying S tier.
I'd say A, because
Right,
an
I
S
think he
tier
should go at A tier.
an S
because,
tier leader can't be brought down by the fucking rain.
An S tier, for him to be on S tier, they have to be perfect. I think it should be reserved for people who really deserve to be above all the
No
others.
one on this list is perfect. Not a single person.
Yeah,
on this list
hold
is
on, right?
perfect.
You're saying he got brought down by the rain, but you have to understand that at the time, I mean, even nowadays, anyone can get brought down by the rain. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you're preparing for an incredibly decisive battle and the weather screws you over, then there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, them Sunday League footballers, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So brave.
There's literally nothing he could have done, right? At the time, nobody else knew it. He did, but artillery was incredibly important, and he used that to its maximal potential. At the time, it had just rained. He could not move the cannons into the positions that he wanted to. If he could, he might have won the Battle of Waterloo.
I mean, I'd say
I
S tier.
think that his self-coronation as emperor is a cause for concern. because
Chad.
the way in which being a monarch works is that you were at the time. I obviously don't believe in hereditary monarchy now, especially as the way that it worked back then was that you were supposed to have a god-given right to the throne, and he crowned himself, which isn't really something that would have made sense at the time. I think that he was a influential statesman, but he should not have been an emperor.
Does that not make him an S then?
Hey, I'm saying, I'll go with Charles. I'll say S. The reign thing kind of does put a blemish for me, but
I mean, there were other reasons that he could not control.
Yeah,
that
he
lost
was.
as well. I mean, he by the time Waterloo happened, he'd only been ruler again for like a few weeks. This was all very quick.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that shouldn't have happened, but they did, and you got to think about that. But I will give in and say S. I'll say S tier.
We can like obviously we've listed some things that didn't like would make him worse in our eyes, or things that didn't quite add up. But compared to the other people that we have lined up to go on the list, he is definitely higher up, and I think for that to like the order to work, he probably does have to go on S. And we also haven't mentioned the actual like economic reforms that he introduced in France. Like, it wasn't all military. He did have a domestic policy which improved the prosperity of his land.
I mean, we didn't even talk about his military tactics in depth either. I mean, he won so many battles. Against all odds, he defeated an Austrian and Russian army that he really shouldn't have won, and he did it. I mean, you could be like, oh, he looks better because the Russians and Austrians were incredibly incompetent. Yes, that as well, but he won, so it doesn't matter.
I would like to bring up that his I forgot what his name is. Hang on, his Napoleonic Code. That it did bring some issues in the form of repealment of women's rights that were instated in the French Revolution.
Does that change his status?
From a feminist perspective, that is obviously immoral, and if you want to look at it from that point of view, that would knock him down a tier. Maybe not a entire tier, but obviously it would dampen his reputation. But I think that it definitely is overshadowed by everything else.
Yeah, right. So we'll move on then, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
George III, where does he go? This one might be a lot harder than you might think. I mean, I think a lot of people might want to dump him in F class, but I think that might be too harsh. Or is it? Or is it?
I would have said one of the worst in D.
D?
I'll go D.
I mean, we could always knock him down. Hold on. Is he worse than Hitler or the same level as Hitler?
You've decided this very quickly, and I think it needs some discussion before you just dump him in one of the tiers.
I mean,
Right,
he
hold
was
on,
apparently
hold
the
on.
most attractive of the royal family.
Yeah, but his piss was like purple.
But anyway,
He lost his mind.
He lost all the colonies.
Okay, wait. We also have to consider, if you put him in D, we are saying that he's equal to Hitler, and I don't think he's equal to Hitler. I think he's worse than Hitler.
Yeah, no, but I said one of the worst in D. Doesn't necessarily mean that means he's worse than Hitler, definitely.
I'd say C class then.
I don't think that you should like think of the tiers like that, because then you've got 6 very like concrete lines that you have to put them on. We can't say that 2 people on the same tier are exactly equal. You have to put them in ranges, because if you were to put like Vladimir Lenin and Ronald Reagan on that same tier, you aren't really saying that they're completely equal. You were just saying that they're in the same range, because they definitely didn't get up to exactly the same point.
Can we just say that George was completely responsible for the loss of the colonies, losing the war, and he wrote a letter after the loss of the colonies, and this is a direct quote from. This is literally on one of the royal family websites. The more we are convinced of the vast importance of those territories, the more we must feel the insecurity of our power. Our view, therefore, ought not to be to increase but preserve them. So basically, he lost all these colonies and then went, they're not that important. So he basically just tried to brush off losing his colonies. And he tried to make these stupid little reforms like the Stamp Act, which basically was just, hi, I'm gonna buy a postcard stamp. What's that? That's a stamp. You now owe me money. Stamp. It was ridiculous.
Fuck you for doing that, you retard. Yeah, how much?
So-
You know, I hate you so much. I had to spend £3 to buy a set of stamps. God damn you.
Yeah, use
damn you.
email. Use
You,
email.
you should just emailed, yeah.
But yeah, he
Should just call
and
the
then,
drone strike on the Americans.
and despite ignoring their request for freedom, their bid for freedom, he never evolved policies in the colonies. He never bothered with that, other than putting in like this things, stupid little rules like the stamp tax and all that stuff. So I think
Right.
he's definitely, I'd say D. I don't think he's quite an F, because I guess he was, he kept power. I suppose there wasn't a revolution. He's not an utter failure of a king, but he was pretty shit.
I mean, he was incredibly unpopular though.
Oh yeah.
With some people. I know that this isn't to change anyone's mind, but just to throw it out there, he was incredibly unpopular with certain sectors of society.
I think we can agree on a D though, can't we? Because he's not quite an F. He did
Yeah,
keep his
I
country
agree.
stable,
Yeah, I agree. Dave.
and he was the king of England and Ireland, and then he formed Great Britain. In all technicality, when he became the king of Great Britain until his death in 820.
Right.
You know.
So moving on, we have Henry VII. Where does he go? I personally
He
think
didn't really do anything.
I think he goes B.
He did win the War of the Roses,
I think
Yeah.
he goes B.
which puts him in like a pretty high position because
That's
he
all.
did
Yeah.
grab.
No, I think he's incredibly underrated.
Yeah, yeah. Didn't he like? I can't remember what exactly the economy, but he's doing like stabilizer.
Yeah, he goes in B class because you have to know that at the end of the War of the Roses, he spent the entire War of the Roses in exile in Brittany. Okay, so then when he did take over, he had absolutely no idea what to do, and then he kept his throne. He fought off so many pretenders and won. I suppose the only point where you could say he may have slipped up a little bit was where at the Battle of Stoke, what happened was his nobles were reluctant to fight for him because there wasn't a clear winner in the fight yet.
He lost
That is the only
support of
point where you can be like, oh, he didn't have full support. But apart from that, he had a pretty smooth reign.
Yeah.
I would say.
I'll go with a B if that's what you want.
I think it's a B. He's very underrated.
Again, you have like glossed over the domestic policy of this leader and focused on war. And I would also like to bring up that he, like Napoleon, brought in some economic reforms which improved the prosperity of
Yeah.
the country.
That's
For
what his name
example,
is.
he supported England's wool industry, and he also did a trade war of sorts with the Netherlands, which heightened trade in the English Channel.
I'll go for an A.
Yeah, I
Oh.
said I think a guy who's in A is someone who's essentially won a war and managed to pretty much economically grow what was Britain. I think there's a complete and fair argument to say this guy's an A. He did a good job.
I
Yeah.
think he should go an A.
I'll say that.
Yeah, we'll just put him in A. He was very rich, by the way.
Oh yeah.
He was
Mm.
very tight with his spending.
Well,
And
that's
as a
how,
result, he got a lot of money.
that's how his
June,
son
June,
inherited all his money.
Yeah, and then his son blew all his inheritance in like the first 5 years.
Oh
of the
well,
War
we
of
get to
France.
go on
What
to him
a
again.
lad.
We get to go
Yeah,
to him
and
now, right?
now we get to go on him. Where does he go?
Well, he was a powerful
he's
leader,
worse
despite being a
because-
fat cunt.
Yeah.
Definitely worse. He had to go below his father.
Yeah, but
Oh,
still,
so-
I'd say a
yeah.
C. He's not quite as bad as George because he was powerful, but only if you focus on scare tactics and power as in battle power. Obviously, he raided all the monasteries and churches and took their gold for his own income to.
Oh, right, okay, we have to mention the creation of the Anglican Church.
Oh my
Because
Hold on,
God,
wait, hold on.
yeah,
This is not going to be as easy as you think it is, because the thing is with the Reformation is that, did he do it for religious reasons or money?
He did it for money because when he died a Catholic. He didn't die a Protestant. He died a Catholic.
He never converted, did he? Yeah.
No,
He didn't need to convert because he didn't actually convert to Protestantism. He just created his own Catholic Church in England that he was the head of, which is what allowed him to get his divorce, which he really did need to hold on to his power. And I think it takes a certain amount of determination to stand up to the Pope and say, look,
yeah.
I am going to do this, and you can't do anything about it. I need an heir. And although it was really convoluted, and the years that came after he got his heir, and the one after that, and the one after that, were pretty horrible. Some of them, especially with like the religious trouble. I think that his determination to actually get himself his heir and secure his dynasty on the throne for the coming years was quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, when they think Henry VIII, they think of fat cunt that killed his wives, but I think that glosses over so much. I also think that people generally think that his wives were so incredibly influential on England as a whole. There were other things that he did that were more influential. For example, multiple wars with France and Scotland, most of which failed massively. I think they're a bigger failure than his wives. I know that's not quite what we're talking about, but just to put it out there in general.
He was.
I think you go see.
If you want to take into account the killing and all of that stuff that he did to his wives, you have to. That is definitely from a moral standpoint, because if you think about it from his point of view, he was just trying to secure his stability.
Yeah.
He was just trying to keep himself and his family on the throne. If you cast aside the actual ethical problems with divorcing and killing your wives to get more heirs, then it really is. It's
different.
not.
It's completely different.
Yeah, it is different because at the time we have to look at the historical context. It was 100% necessary that he got himself an heir, and in divorcing his wives, he did succeed in getting heirs, which kept his dynasty on the throne for another at least 50 years. But I know it was longer.
Is he a C or a B then?
C. That's it.
I think he should go on B.
Where do you put him, Alfie?
C.
Is he better than Stalin?
No. I don't think he is.
I'm finding this really difficult because
The monarch automatically has his power. Stalin had to keep his power, but the monarch, unless they have a full-scale revolution, which actually is hard to do, even if you are the shittest king who loses all your colonies, you still don't have a revolution. So I'm gonna stay solid at C.
I'm gonna say C as well.
Stalin never needed an heir, though. You can draw a distinction between a dictator and a monarch, but at the end of the day, they're in different situations which require different reactions to hold your power. Stalin's interests end upon his death, but
Technically, everybody's interesting.
Yeah, Henry had to look beyond his own life and try and secure things for his children and their children as well.
Damn, that is deep.
Didn't work very well, but
Daddy Henry.
He tried his best.
He did succeed to a certain point, right? But you have to say that luck was against him, incredibly against him.
It
Luck
didn't
was
help.
also against Elizabeth and Mary and Edward.
it didn't help that when he died, they all just killed each other.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I put him in C and not B is because Henry killed Wolsey and Cromwell, the two people that were basically... You were talking about his successes in terms of domestic and foreign. second ago, but really, the people that were working this Tudor machine was Cardinal Wolsey and Cromwell, and then he killed them both. Why? And then after, actually, in fact, after he kills Cromwell, he gets incredibly manipulated at court, and just does loads of stupid things. I mean, for example, this isn't the best case, but I think it's kind of funny as well. You know, Catherine Parr, his last wife, his advisors were trying to just screw around with him and manipulate him for their own gain. And they said to him, "Oh, look, Catherine's been cheating on you." And he knew that they were trying to trick him, but he just pretended like he didn't know. Arrested Catherine Parr. She was terrified, and then went up to her and said, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I knew it all along." Turned to his advisors and said, "Don't do that again." And there's kind of a method to the madness. I mean, it's up to you to decide.
That is a sad moment.
Yeah, no one's gonna do that. That is quality, right?
There is some kind of method to the madness to an extent, but I think he definitely messed up by executing his two advisors.
Any one person who has absolute power, their individual personality leaks into the way that they run their land, and I think that there is a method for madness, because there has to be. He has to, in being the only person who has that power over his country, he has to put his own sort of personality into the way that he rules.
But at this point in his reign, after his third marriage, his mental health was beginning to deteriorate to incomprehensible. He was incredibly depressed, and God knows a lot of other things. I mean, his physical health was terrible at this point. He had a leg injury which prevented him from playing sports, and as a result, he was incredibly depressed. He had gout in his leg. He had an open wound on his thigh that wouldn't shut, so it's rotting. I mean, this man was
Green
also
Sleeves.
mad.
He wrote Green
This man
Sleeves.
was also mad, which is why I put him on the C or not a B.
He wrote Green Sleeves. That was pretty good.
Yeah, right. So we're going to move
Well, he's
on
reported
to
to have.
his daughter, Elizabeth I. Now, where does she go?
I mean, she was. Nobody questioned her. Everybody was terrified of her. She didn't go there. She didn't do very well with the whole religion debacle. Although I guess she did in some aspects.
I think I want to put her in A, you know.
Mm.
Because I think from Elizabeth onwards began. I mean, people say that Elizabeth had a golden age. Okay,
She held on to her power throughout her reign very well.
Yeah, Elizabeth onwards is when England became a proper world power. Because under Henry and under both Henrys, England wasn't really that important. And actually, towards the end of Henry VIII's rule, he wanted to step away from Europe because he was terrified that they might do a Catholic crusade. So I think she deserves to be an A.
There was a lot
minimum.
of technological advancements under her reign. I mean, as far as technological advancements can go in that time, but there were some, aspects of technology. I think there was I don't know if it was a myth or not. There was reportedly one of the first ever wristwatches invented and handed to her as a gift.
Her reign saw a lot of cultural development as well, such as the Shakespearean theatre.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of these are. She's like the mother of England, really, isn't
Yeah.
she?
She did also, with the problem with Spain, she held the power quite well. She had that struggle with.
Didn't choose
was
an
it,
heir.
Felipe.
King Felipe of
Trying to
Spain.
take over.
Yeah, and she dealt with that quite well. Made sure that she used the natural defences of England to her advantage.
She
But
took
by
on
no
the-
means was she stupid.
Oh, she made a powerful navy, like a ridiculously powerful navy.
Yeah, so A.
Yeah, I think A is a
A?
fair
Yeah.
judgment.
What
A.
stops her from being S? I'm not saying that I support it, but just in general, what stops her from being S class?
She
She
did
was
not
heir of the
treat.
dynasty.
Yeah.
She didn't have an heir, and her treatment of the religious, hot button issues of the time could have been improved.
Yeah, I don't think her social thing stands out as much as a foreign thing.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do have to take into account that for her, acquiring an heir was a lot more difficult than if she would be a male ruler, because if she actually got married to the king of another country to
Never
get
claim
an
on
heir,
the throne.
then they would have a claim on the throne, and a lot of other countries would want England under their rule, and also they would probably want to convert to Catholicism, which she spent her entire reign trying to
stop.
So I think that she should go on S.
But she survived a
S. We're putting her in S. I would advocate to
No,
put her in
I'm
S as
staying
well, to
A.
be honest, because she's
She should
so
go
incredible.
on S.
Yeah.
I'm simping over Elizabeth I,
Oh my
but
God.
genuinely,
Fucking
um,
iDubbbz.
I want to
England
stay
wouldn't
A.
be the same without her.
I want to stay
I'm
A
gonna
because she was
subscribe
only.
to Elizabeth's OnlyFans.
Oh,
Go
God.
on.
She was only as influential as her grandfather. She wasn't more influential, really. They both did impressive things, but you can't put her higher than Henry VII.
No, but right. Henry VII didn't make England a world power.
Yeah.
And you have
Henry
to remember,
VII only secured the power of his dynasty. He won the War of the Roses and then got an heir. That is quite impressive because in what he was doing, he was successful, but he didn't bring England from one tier to the next.
I'm still reluctant to put her
didn't-
to an S.
he didn't bring England out the Dark Ages and into a world power, basically, because you have to remember who came before Elizabeth. It was Mary, and she was not Elizabeth. Basically, wasn't the same. She didn't
Whoa.
make England a world power either. She
Really,
just spent her
I
time.
haven't figured that.
Well,
She shouldn't spend her time going mental and whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
So-
I think S is. I would have said an upper A, so I don't think an S is a bad judgment.
I think S as well.
S.
S. S.
Well, I
we're
mean,
simping.
doesn't matter
we're
my
simping.
vote, does it?
S for simp.
How long have we been doing this, right? Because we've done about.
I can give you.
12.
We've been doing it an hour and 11.
Oh Jesus Christ!
That's not that bad.
What?
Actually, hold on.
We're not even halfway.
The
Okay,
hour,
right.
the podcast will be 4 hours
let's
long.
speed up a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Speed up, otherwise I'm gonna be here till I die.
Right. So from one matriarch to another, Victoria, does she
I
also
think
go
we
in
need to
S?
split this into
S.
25 ruler parts rather than 50.
Yeah.
Okay, right, so how many have we got here? 1, 2, 4. Okay, well, we have 12. Okay, so
S. Victoria's an S.
Just make it like a part 1 and a part.
okay, so we
Yeah.
go all the way to Mao Zedong and we stop then.
Oh God,
Right,
what a
okay.
place to stop! Fucking hell.
Right, can we all agree Victoria's an S? Industrial Revolution. I mean, she was just England modernized under her.
Yeah, I mean, if Elizabeth I took England at the Dark Ages, Victoria took them to another level.
Yeah.
But the thing is with Victoria, could you put her on the similar level to Elizabeth?
I don't
Because
think
I
you
suppose
could.
at the time the involvement was a little bit less.
A little bit, but she was still incredibly influential in even political matters.
Between the era of Elizabeth I and Elizabeth II now was Victoria, and I think you can really draw a contrast between the power of a monarch when we had the first Elizabeth and the power of a monarch today, which is almost nothing. And Victoria was sort of in the middle of that, where she had a fair deal of influence, but other figures would be also they would hold a lot of power as well. And I think you have to take into account that a lot of the successes of the British Empire under her rule were the successes of other people, which she was just a figurehead of.
But she was still very good with foreign policy and such, because that was still mainly down to her, and she was good at keeping hold of and improving and strengthening the British Empire, which you do have to credit to her. And I think she should be on the same level as Elizabeth. Attribution an S.
I think she goes for an A.
I think she should go on A.
Ben,
I'm in agreement of A.
right, we are putting Victoria I
Bro.
in A. Next we have Otto von Bismarck from the same era, but where does he go?
Ooh.
I mean, for a start, he's not. I don't want to make it like a. He's not well appreciated. I'll put it that way.
Do you think he's underrated?
Yeah,
I think he goes A.
I'll
gonna
go
throw that
along
out
with you.
there.
I'll go along with you and say that. I'll agree.
I think we all know why he would go into an A. I think we all know what he's done.
I do think that he's underrated. I mean, for a start, it's not taught about really. I mean, it doesn't come into history.
We have to think about how impressive a unification of Germany actually is, because for hundreds of years before he united the land, it had been separated. It was tribes during the older ages, and then it eventually became the Holy Roman Empire, which was also divided into loads of tiny little city-states and other power structures. And I think that actually uniting that land, which had so many perceived differences between one area and another, is quite an impressive feat.
I think also he beat the Habsburgs and France.
Yeah, that's
impressive. That's not easy.
My thing, it's not right. What I was trying to say before was that it's not taught. Like, what I meant by he underappreciated it. It's not many people know. Well, I mean, not many. Obviously, quite a few do, but the general public don't know of how big a feat it was. So I think when people look at it, they might just pass it off as nothing compared to like Victoria or Elizabeth. So like some people will be reluctant to put them on an A or an S level. I'd be reluctant to put them on an S level, but I think I'll go with Charles and say A.
Does everyone say A?
I think she should go an A.
I'd say A in between Winston and King Henry VII.
If we're doing it like that, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's knocking on the door of S, but I think there's just I don't know what it is, but he's not. I can't put him in the same level as Napoleon or.
Yeah,
he's not quite there. Right, next we have George Washington. Now, where does he...
I'm gonna say a B.
B?
A B, just like the man is clinging on by a string.
Do you think he's overrated?
Oh
His
God, yeah.
Power was more a product of the support of other people than of his own making.
Yeah.
Do you think that he represents more of an ideology rather than like a person, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that when you think of George Washington, you aren't necessarily actually thinking of the man George Washington. You're thinking of the ideas that he represents.
He was a traitor for a start. He was. He was a British.
Well, I mean, he was.
He was a British general
his own
at one
independence for his own country.
Well, no, because he was a British general. He was employed by the King George, and then he turned to the American side.
I don't care.
Is that bad leadership?
No. If he's.
Well, it doesn't display trustworthiness, does it? He could have done a 180 on America again and gone back to the British side.
Yeah, but he didn't.
But he didn't.
The reason he betrayed the UK was because he believed more with the American ideas, which was Republic.
I guess under King George is fair enough.
So, is he a C or a B or an A?
I'm gonna have to stay on. I'm gonna have to stay C.
Well, it was
He's
B originally,
overrated.
so staying with it.
Am I? Shit. All right, I'm moving down to
so
a C.
You've just done a 180, so you can't fucking criticize him for and just go, oh, I'm gonna go C now.
I am gonna go with C though, because I've talked myself down one. Because yeah, but once, like Charles said, it was an ideology.
But
It was an ideology, and he is overrated. When people think about him, they don't think about what he did. He was strongly military minded, and any military you can assign any, well, not any, but a lot of military gains that America had to him. But it was an ideology. It wasn't. When you think of him, you don't think of any big power plays that he made. That were
power play.
Yes, George Washington power play.
You know what I mean?
It sounds like something you'd do in Overwatch.
Power play.
Power play. Yeah.
But
right, hold on. So,
you know what I mean?
Right. Just to wrap this up quicker. C.
C.
Isaac? C. Ben, C.
C.
Yeah, C. Right. Next we have Abraham Lincoln. Probably B. Oh, you straight away saying B.
I just want to put something out there before we start. His most famous thing, freeing the slaves. He said, I'm quoting him. Well, I'm not directly quoting him, but indirectly, it is recorded him saying in speeches, "If I could win the Civil War without freeing the slaves, I would." He didn't want to. He
You know,
was
but
not
he-
this big like freedom man. He was he didn't want the slaves free. It was an accidental, unwanted byproduct.
Freedom, man.
There
Yeah,
are
hold on. But
Big
throughout the
freedom, man.
war, he did change his tone once he realized that this was not just a small rebellion. This was a civil war, like to a new level. That the US, like, this is the Civil War is the bloodiest conflict the USA has ever been involved in. And if you think about it, it's actually quite tragic because these are still Americans fighting Americans, and a country that culture is surrounded by "we are all Americans, we must unite" or whatever. It's quite like tragic, right?
Mm.
And he changes his tone because he realizes he changes the tone from what you said to what he says at the Emancipation Proclamation because he realizes now that there's no point in trying to keep the Union together. We just have to fight them and beat them now at this point. So you can't necessarily say that because people will say that and be like, oh yeah, he was like immoral, he didn't actually care about slaves or whatever. I think he did, because if he really didn't care about slaves, he could have kept up with Southern appeasement and gone all the way, and he just didn't have to free the slaves, but he did go all the way.
there are other causes of the war other than a desire to free the slaves,
Hmm.
because the southern states had differences to the northern states that didn't involve slavery anyway. But they had economic and like just social.
A lot of it was
political
based on their
differences.
laws and rights.
Yeah, but the tensions that built up towards the war kind of occurred because every time they would like create a new state, it was a race between the Democrats and the not Democrats. What am I on about? Oh, shut up. You know what? Whatever I was about to say, I'm not gonna say it because I said that. Oh my god.
Can we just agree? He was good, but not great. Can we put him on a B?
Did anyone disagree with B?
No, but I'd say he's been on the low end of a B.
Okay,
Really?
actually, I do not think that he should go above Henry VIII.
Alright, yeah.
Seriously?
If it wasn't for a war, his presidency. If it wasn't for the war and the way he was assassinated, his presidency wouldn't be particularly memorable.
Yeah, he got headshotted, man.
Yeah, hold on, but you could say the same about literally any of these people. A lot of these people are built by like a momentous event, like Winston Churchill, for example, or Napoleon. I mean, if you said if there was no World War II, we probably wouldn't remember Winston Churchill. Then you'd be right because we wouldn't. We remember him because of the war. And
Fair
in
point.
that same regard, we remember Lincoln because of the war because he didn't want to just let it go. Like maybe other politicians at the time might have done because he was surrounded by advisors and military generals who didn't care as much as he did, and he had to fight through that. Like through the first stages of the Civil War, it looked like he was going to lose because all his generals didn't care enough. They didn't care enough like he did.
I'm happy with him on a B or a C.
I'd be more comfortable
on
putting him
C.
on a B.
B.
Isaac.
See,
Right, Alfie, you decide and vote then.
I do want him on a C, but I don't think that reasonably we're going to be able to change your and Ben's mind. But I'm really reluctant to say B. I agree with Isaac. I think he should be a C.
I think he's very middle B.
We could put him at the high end of a C.
Well, I said low end of a B.
Well, then would you be
No,
willing
I-
to change
I
to a
think
C then?
he's best placed in high C.
Yeah, because he's not.
Yeah, I don't
He
see.
was influential in
Right.
the war, but he wasn't. He didn't have a massive impact other than that. Which
Yeah, hold
fair
on, but
enough.
his presidency was shaped by the war. He could.
Yeah,
You can't do anything else apart. If there's a war like that, you can't do anything else except war.
yeah.
Like, what do you want him to do? Do a stamp thing like George did? Because he couldn't have done that because, well, there's a war.
I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, obviously, what he did was a massive. Once again, a massive feat. Thanks, Ben. It was a massive feat,
Oh, feet.
but God,
Shut up.
Nonsense.
it was a massive feat of power. It was a power play, but once again, he did 180 his own views, and it is very hard to definitively say whether that was because 180 his views increased his support, or because that was actually him realizing that his morals were incorrect. We
Did
can't
he lead the
definitively.
people, or did the people lead him?
Can we just keep
Exactly.
on a C?
Yeah,
This is
let's just
gonna
leave
go-
him.
Okay, you were gonna-
He's
yeah,
already
I'm-
there.
Right.
Move on.
Let's move on. Next we have the Duke of Wellington, Napoleon's rival, I suppose. bit of an outlier, I guess. He's not as. I mean,
Well,
he's incredibly
no,
famous,
really.
but he's not.
No, but like
I
his
think-
actual
Most
leadership
of these have
style's not
been
known.
heads of state of some kind, and then we.
I mean, he was the prime minister. He was the prime minister at some point, but he's most famous for being a military general.
Yeah.
Of that, he beat Napoleon at Waterloo.
Yeah, which is a feat.
But we've already
like-
put that down to things that shouldn't have
Exactly. So
happened.
what
Yeah.
I think he goes a C.
He
I
was a
think he's
strong
just-
leader, though.
He's just a cool guy, but that's about it. I think he's a C.
Hmm.
And he
Yeah,
was
yeah.
he was
Yeah,
like
You have to go quite middle for this guy
Yeah,
because
I'd
he
agree.
didn't do anything momentous, but he was
Well-
successful in what he did do.
He
think
certainly
I-
wasn't incompetent.
I think you could say that beating Napoleon is quite momentous, but like he's very much shaped by that. Really, if you think of if someone knows him and you just put a name in front of him, like his name in front of him, first thing you think, oh, beat Napoleon most of the time.
he was in the early Conservative Party as well. He went from the Tory Party, which was one of the older political parties, and then he was in the creation of the modern Conservative Party. So he was a strong political figure.
Yeah.
When he was the prime minister as part of this party, he did bring in many acts that increased the civil rights of Catholics in the United Kingdom, because they had been quite marginalized due to them not being Protestant in the past.
I think he goes in C.
I
Whereabouts?
want to
in
say
C,
B. I want to say B.
I think he goes very middle C because I don't
Yeah.
think he wasn't terrible. He wasn't terrible, but would I put him in the same tier as the people in B? No, I don't think so.
No, I wouldn't.
Because
I
because
think
the
he should go
people,
C.
I think the people in B are incredibly impactful. I mean, not saying the other people aren't; these are all incredibly impactful people. But the people in B are very particularly impactful for a certain thing, and that they did at least one thing very, very well. I don't think you could argue the same about Wellington.
Yeah,
Alright.
I'd
Fair
say
point.
mid.
I'll go
from
with
middle
it.
of C. Sorry.
Right, we have got 7 left. So next we have President Eisenhower, also General Eisenhower.
He wasn't that good.
You weren't that good?
Oh, I mean, he did the bomb thing, but then also that's
He did the bomb thing.
but then also
he-
that's widely considered a war crime. So
Yeah.
I mean, no, actually, that was Truman.
bollocks,
Firstly.
yeah, it was, wasn't it?
And secondly, he orchestrated one of the largest military invasions in history.
Yeah.
It was D-Day. He did D-Day.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I just got my
It's not
world.
easy.
I've got my politics backwards. Yeah, I got the two fuckers mixed up.
He did also organize the invasion of North Africa during the Second World War as well, which was another important front.
Yeah, I think his war achievements, I think, shine brighter than his political achievements. I think, can we agree with that?
Yeah, that's an agreement. He
His
did a
his
lot.
presidency was
It's shaped
defined
that.
by the war.
The
like,
war.
The period that he was in was a very
But then I get.
turbulent.
We've said
military
this
war.
Similar to
about-
Churchill.
Yeah, we've said this about Churchill and Lincoln. When it is, it's not their fault that it's defined by war, because that was a major conflict. So it's not his fault really. So you kind of just have to go off the war. That's all there really is to base off of.
Yeah, but this isn't just like Wellington, where it's like, oh, he's a good general. This man was extraordinary. And the
Yeah.
troops loved him. Okay, this wasn't like Patton or Montgomery or any of the other generals where they could be animosity. They loved this man, and they were willing to do whatever this man told them to do.
He did
So-
also manage to end the Korean War, or
Yeah,
at least to remove China from the Korean War by quite aggressively threatening to use nuclear weapons, but it did have the desired effect.
I will fucking nuke you.
Does he go in C or B then?
I'll put him in
B.
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 B, yeah. Mainly for World War II, though.
Yeah,
I would say, yeah.
but that's all you
Okay.
can. Yeah.
Henry V.
No idea.
No idea. Okay, right. Anyone
I'm
else?
indecisive. I'll go with the majority.
I have incredibly limited knowledge on
Yeah.
Henry V.
I think the main problem with Henry V is that immediately everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, he's incredible. He's a war hero. He won at Agincourt, but then he didn't win the war." I know it's not his fault.
Yeah.
I know it's not his fault, but
Well, the 100 Years' War was very long, and I
yeah,
assure you
I
this
know,
man
I
did
know
not
that, I
live
know
for
that.
100
But,
years.
by the
Whoa.
time, what I'm saying is, by the time at the end of his reign, it wasn't as successful as he probably should have been.
Yeah.
Agincourt, and then after that,
Put him on a
It's okay.
C.
In the time that he reigned for, he was quite successful. But when a war is 100 years long,
no,
there
sorry,
is
not
not-
right. Let
there's
me
not
let
a
me
lot he can do to
yeah,
control.
let me rephrase it, right. Not the 100 Years War, but the period that he controlled the 100 Years War in his reign, it had a high, but it could have been better. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'll say C.
Yeah, I think
Is
C
it
is a
C?
good place for him.
Whereabouts in C?
Just anywhere. On the end. Stick him on the end.
Yeah.
Right. Next we have Vlad the Impaler, which wasn't our idea; it was Tyler's idea, and he's not here.
He's
So
not here.
we've just lost our biggest Vlad the Impaler fan.
Yeah. But
So,
I'm sure he has a lot of reasons for why he likes the Impaler.
We can always move him into the second half and move like Queen Elizabeth into this
yeah,
half.
because I think Tyler would like to. talk
Tyler
about
would
it.
like to talk
Yeah, I
about
think
it.
that's fair enough.
Move
So
him
what
move
do
him
you
into the
think
second
of
half and put Queen
Uh,
Elizabeth into
we
our half.
can-
Wait, no, hold on. That means we have to talk about Gandhi.
Oh God.
We
Tyler-
don't have
I think
time for that,
Tyler
we don't have
also-
time for that. We don't have
I
time
Tyler-
for
don't
put
wanna
the Queen-
talk
put Queen
about
Elizabeth
that
into this
man
half.
Limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Put Queen
fair
Elizabeth
enough.
now.
Limit. Right.
Just
Queen.
fix it. Queen Elizabeth II. Where does she go?
A.
Kill her.
A.
She hasn't
Right,
really
let
done
me
the
just-
right lot.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
no.
Right. Before everyone, yeah. Personally, I have a lot of respect for her. I think nowadays she doesn't do a lot, but when she did take over, she did have to oversee basically the dissolution of the British Empire. Her family are terrible. Her family are
Right.
horrible to her,
Yeah.
right? She had to put up with all of that, and she's still like maintaining like a strong figure. She's not terrible at her job. She's good at it. She's a good leader. Do I think she's an A? No, but
Nah.
it wouldn't be fair to put her in like D because it's like, oh, she's not done enough. Well, she can't do enough. But
Let me
with the
just
power that
say-
she's done great.
She
My
doesn't
points
lead,
for an
though.
A.
She
No,
does
but-
not lead.
But here, right, let
She
me put
is
my
a
thing in the
figurehead.
A. Right. First of all, she was born into a monarchy which was losing power. Her father was probably one of the last controlling monarchs of our country, and he ended up dying of stress from war. She was for during the war. She was an ambulance driver. She is very good at connecting with the people. Like, she actually does connect with the people, and I would say over 80% of the country absolutely adore her.
It's like that time she cameoed in the Olympic opening ceremony.
Exactly, with an actor, and no other royal would have done that. She is good at she is good at connecting with her people, which other monarchs have not really been. They've been like held on a podium and loved, where she is probably one of the first monarchs to do that and actually interact with socially with, well, peasants to her technically, and she was the figurehead and still is the figurehead for the
Scum
Commonwealth.
class.
Well, she's the figurehead for the Commonwealth, which is
She
still an
is.
important role. She controls all of our foreign policy, really. She's involved in, talking to foreign diplomats, involved in political discussions with foreign countries. She has been very good at making points to political leaders that have hit home with them. I believe it was the Saudi Arabian leader came. I think it was either Saudi Arabian or Iranian or something like that. Leader came over, and to prove a point about women's rights, she drove him around herself in a Land Rover to prove that women should be allowed to drive and have an education, things like that. She is still, even though her monarch position, it's not that it doesn't have the power. There's no power being taken away from it because you can't. There is no way. It's just that the monarchy chooses not to use it anymore. She could still just, click her fingers, fire the prime minister, do whatever.
I don't think she could, though, because that in the modern society where most countries have a purely democratic society is
Okay.
not going to sit well.
No,
with-
but I'm not saying
Yeah,
that
hold
she
on, hold on,
would
wait,
or that
let's
it's
not talk
considerable,
about-
but she
let's not-
has the
let's not-
power.
Let's not
to.
talk about hypothetical, right? Let's talk about what she's done, right?
She's the figurehead of the.
You mentioned that she's a very independent person, and that sounds like it's kind of like a trivial merit thing, but I think that's quite impressive given the fact that all the people she was surrounded with didn't give a damn. Her husband more you can infer that her husband cheated on her multiple times. Her children are scumbags. Okay, she's done very well for herself. I think she is a solid B.
She will be missed when she dies.
I really want to put her on an A. I'm really inclined.
Her prime is definitely not now. Her prime was when she took power and oversaw the collapse of the British Empire. That was her prime. After that, times changed.
I think that should that should get her an A though.
I
And for a start, she is and still very influential in modern politics. She is influential internationally. She's influential. She's the head of the Commonwealth. She is. I mean, yeah, you cannot say she is. That's all you can say. She's influential throughout the entire world. She is a ridiculously influential, still probably one of the most influential monarchs in the world.
Yeah, but I don't think she was as. I don't think she's better than Lenin, Thatcher, Reagan, Ike, Attlee. I don't think she's better than that. I think
she
she's
was
just as good as
influencing
them.
in that time, though.
Yeah.
Not Lenin's
but
time,
I don't-
obviously.
yeah, but I think that to put her in that category is a compliment. But I don't think it. I think
it
putting it
shows.
too higher is too far.
Well, no, because that's why you wouldn't put her as an S, but she still is
I'd put a B. She
a
just,
strong leader.
Yeah, I think B.
I
Isaac,
think, I think everyone in there fits with her.
B.
Honestly.
B. Okay, we're going B. Sorry, Alfie.
Whereabouts on B?
I'm a monarchy supporter. That's
The thing is,
yeah. Keep it there. Yeah.
see,
You just put it on A.
I didn't mean to do that. Whoops.
Well, come on, she's a high B at least.
I know. I can see why you'd
Yeah,
put it an A, but
very,
I
very
think she's
high
a B.
with
She's
that B line, I feel like everyone's so similar that even if we put them higher
Left,
or like
left,
lower, it's
left.
not much of an insult or a
Yeah, about
compliment.
that.
They're all very similar.
Yeah, I think to be put in B is quite an honour.
I'm probably
Yeah.
Because
biased.
all those people in B are
That
incredibly.
B tier is.
I am a
very
full
good.
monarchy supporter. And I know a lot of people aren't, but like that's probably a bias on my end.
All right, next.
Let's
We
move on.
got
Let's,
to
let,
that.
let, let's get a bit quicker.
We
We
got
have
power through.
Suleiman the Magnificent with his giant onion hats. Where does,
I mean, that's an
Who?
instant S tier. Come on, Onion Hat Man.
where does he go? Where does Onion Ham Man go? Where does Suleiman the Magnificent go?
C.
C. What? No.
All right, B.
Okay,
Ah,
hang on.
ah,
This guy
push.
was the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm like, this
Right,
guy is
he-
like brilliant.
He Ottomaned the empire. He's the
He
equivalent
did.
of Elizabeth to the Ottomans. Okay.
Mate,
And
this,
whilst I don't think he's an S because he's the equivalent, I think he deserves higher than C.
I'll give him
yeah,
a B.
I think there's an argument for A.
hang on,
I'd
he,
say-
he has a really that's a pretty good mushroom hat right there.
Yeah,
in
I
the-
mean,
in the picture I'm looking at, he has a good hat.
Right,
Yeah,
are we going
like,
A then? Are we going
But
A?
the
then?
only reason,
Yeah.
no, come on. The only reason I'm
Mushroom hat.
inclined to say B, yeah, the only reason I'm
Mushroom hat.
inclined to say B is because if you put him A, he's above Queen Elizabeth. Great Britain still exists. The Ottomans don't.
Right, hold on. The Ottomans have existed for
yeah,
pretty much the same time the UK
But
has, though.
but we still exist, and the Ottomans don't.
One
the
day,
Ottomans-
they won't exist anymore. It's just the passage of time that you're talking about. That
Yeah.
isn't a reason that one person is.
And it
burst
wasn't,
Also,
his,
it wasn't his
fault at
fault.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
know,
He was
I
like,
know.
Oh, the empire you created didn't exist. Oh yeah, well, I was dead. No one just would. Oh, but it's his fault.
Been dead for like
Oh,
100
you're
years
British,
as well,
what are you
if
on
over.
about?
Right, hold on. You have
He
to think
managed
about
to
what the Ottomans
invade his
were.
way through Europe until he hit Vienna.
Yeah, this.
Yeah,
look,
this
this
is-
I'll
guy's
go away.
an
I'll
A.
go. All right,
This guy's
I'll
an
agree
And
with you. I'll go
he,
away.
he made the empire out of nothing.
You
You have
made
to
the
remember,
point.
before the Ottomans, it was just a bunch of angry Arabs and Turks
Wow.
beating sticks. And then he came and was like, let's not do this anymore. And then he created a legacy where he could do what Isaac said. You know, go to Vienna. That was like unthinkable at the time.
He's got to be an A.
It's
He's
like,
gotta be an A.
I'll go away then.
There
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
long period in which Europeans all over the continent were afraid of this one Ottoman Empire, despite them being hundreds of different kingdoms. They
Yeah.
would look to the east and be afraid.
Yeah,
Right.
the Onion Hat Man. It's
Onion Hat
that's
Man, yeah.
scary.
Next,
They,
we
they would
have-
say that the mushroom hat man is coming, and they would. they
Yeah, I
would
mean,
have a riot.
amongst all the divisions in Europe, the one thing that unified them was the fear of
Of the Onion
the
Hat.
Onion Man. Okay, next, Julius Caesar.
Oh well,
A.
I mean,
Well, he died, so
least-
you know. Let's just
Guys,
He
Ro-
died.
F
Guys,
it.
Rome doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, shut up.
he did walk in to like
Bastard.
places
You
he just
actual
got
bastard.
This is mine.
Rome didn't collapse under the
Yeah, that was the
under
joke.
reign of
That was the
Caesar.
joke. That was the joke.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I know. What I want to bring my attention to is that we can't equate for any failures of the Roman Empire to Julius Caesar that didn't occur during his reign, whether they came before or after.
I think there's an argument for S, like a strong one.
I think
Ah.
I mean, there is a reason he's remembered by literally everyone, even people
Yeah.
that don't give a damn about history.
He is legend, isn't he?
Yeah, he is literally legend.
What he did to create the Roman Empire out of its republic, the like assimilation of so many different barbarian tribes, was impressive because he would get these people with their hundreds of different cultural customs to unite under the Roman banner.
Are we putting him in S then?
I think S is whereabouts on S though?
Oh, wait, hold on. Are we gonna order this tier like each list, like section?
Well, I mean, if we're gonna look at S, we're gonna think the first person in S is, in our opinion, the best. Obviously.
his final words were very dramatic. Et
I don't
tu
care.
Brute.
Right,
It
hold
meant
on.
you too, Brutus.
Hold on, so we're gonna put him in S, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it would be disrespectful for him to put him in A.
Yeah. He's genuinely brilliant.
He was assassinated.
I'd put him in mid.
He was a
he'd be in the
dictator
mid-
who was assassinated by the Roman senators.
S. I think that's fair.
Does that take away from his initial leadership, though?
Yeah,
Not his
hold on.
initial
He did
leadership.
go from like rags to ruin, rags to
He was
riches.
he
though.
was killed by his own friend. That's how bad his dictatorship got at the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But
Oh,
that
I
does not
remember
change.
reading one story. I am 90% sure that this was about Caesar. He got captured by some pirates in the Mediterranean, and they
know what you're on
sent
about.
a message to his government saying that they wanted a certain amount of silver as a ransom for him to give him back. And he yelled at this person who was arranging a ransom to ask for more money, as he believed that he was worth a lot more silver than they were asking for.
That is a power move.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, isn't it? You guys, I mean, earlier you guys talked about power moves when we were talking about Henry,
Mate,
both Henrys. So it's a power move, isn't it?
But the
he
thing,
was such a great Overwatch gamer. Holy
Like,
shit,
he
all these
did
power
manage
moves.
to get all the way through from Italy to Gaul and then over the English Channel to England. That is a long way to go in prehistory, before the birth of Christ. That
Yeah,
is
this
that
isn't
is
even-
distance, and to retain control of that area for as long as he did in that era where every power structure was so loose.
What-
Then
but then
that-
once
that
again,
is
his dictatorship
impressive.
got so bad that a man who was considered one of his only friends, his final words were as he was being stabbed by his own friend, "You too, Brutus." His
Mate,
own
it's-
friend killed him.
Yeah, hold on, but that I don't.
At any rate, though, you could say the same thing about the horrific dictatorships of other leaders that we've put on this list.
Why is it
Mm.
relevant though that he was killed by
Stalin
his friend?
himself
Death-
died, alright?
It isn't relevant unless it is the defining thing. And while his death is remembered, in part because of the Shakespeare play, I think.
Well,
I think, yeah, it is over dramatized.
Yeah, it is dramatized, but it doesn't actually matter. His actions in life are much more important.
I mean, we can talk about his decline or whatever, but the decline of Caesar isn't big enough to outweigh the fact that he turned this republic into his own dictatorship and conquered beyond the borders of what they knew existed.
Yeah.
And for that, he's number one.
Yeah.
Okay.
He goes before Napoleon, he goes before Elizabeth, he goes ahead of Bismarck, Churchill, Henry.
I guess he
Whatever.
was the
Don't list off
leader.
the whole thing, please.
He was.
Wait,
Don't
hold on.
increase middle name.
Hitler, George III.
He was the leader. Like when you think of a powerful figurehead.
Which is why he's remembered.
When you
Right.
think of the Roman Empire, you think of
Let's-
Julius
Julius Caesar.
Yeah,
Right,
let's move on. Let's move
Let's move on.
Quickly.
Yeah, we are done
Two more people.
circle jerking Caesar. We move on to another ancient conqueror, Alexander the Great. Where does he go? Is he as good as Caesar?
Alexander
No.
the Great he founded a huge empire, and it was something that he believed to be impossible in the time. They conquered so far east that he actually reached, I believe, the Indus River, which is is a long way to go again in prehistory, from Greece to the Indus Valley.
Yeah,
And,
he conquered all of modern day Pakistan.
I'd say it wasn't as. I'd give him an A, and a solid A. I'd probably say the highest on the A list. Well, no, because he's maybe not as high as. Okay, I'd say one of the highest on the A list, but he just doesn't have the same influence in modern times as Julius Caesar does. He doesn't have the same. He wasn't. If you think of leadership, you think of Julius Caesar. If you think of the Roman Empire, you think of Julius Caesar. But if you think of leadership, you don't go to his name.
But if you
But
think
you
of
should.
if you think of a conqueror,
I
then
think
Alexander the Great comes to mind.
Right, hold on. In terms of largest empires in history, Alexander's empire is up there.
But is it more? But should he be higher than the Ottomans?
Yes.
Yes.
He should be. He should be on that same level because he.
That's
did,
what. Yeah.
again,
So he should be an A then.
I think he should be an S.
he managed to unite a divided area, much as Asia Minor was divided for the Ottoman Empire, and that they rose up and then expanded at an amazing rate. Alexander did the same thing with Greece.
Exactly. That's my point. So he
and
should be on the A then,
that's
with the same
the thing.
level.
I think he should be on A because
Yeah, A.
his like the way that he ran his country was similar to the way that the Ottomans ran theirs, and he took a lot of inspiration, I know, from Cyrus the Great, who was emperor of Persia at one time, who expanded their empire hugely, and it just brings a long line of people from that kind of geographical area, and they are very much the same in their ideas of uniting an area and then expanding its influence to unseen places.
What stops him being an S though? Like, what is the one
Because
thing
you-
that stops him being an S?
Because. Well, what Isaac said, he should be on the same level, not
If
higher.
he was to be on the S, then I think that Solomon should
Yeah.
also be on S,
Exactly.
which would leave him on A.
I think A fits.
I don't know if I can do that though.
No,
I want to put him in S. I
But
want to
if
put
you
him in S.
compare the two, then surely they should both be on S.
Hold on,
Because
so
if you
who-
compare the two, they're
are
two
they
similarities.
equal, or is one better than the other?
They're equal.
You think that
equal.
Solomon the Magnificent
don't
and
think they're
Alexander the Great?
They
are
they
equal?
accomplished
I don't think they do.
very
I
similar.
don't think
feats.
we're equal. They're both. Don't get me wrong. They're both brilliant. I just think Alexander, you have to take into context. Fucking.
Well, me and Isaac are on
how
A.
I went
Well,
for-
we can take into account the invasion of the Persian Empire, which Alexander started, and they did something that the Ottomans, to my knowledge, didn't do, which was take a kind of revenge against an empire that had picked on them in the past,
I think he's.
which
I think he's
could be used as a point to push him above Solomon.
I think he's an S.
I just don't think he's quite S. Just
I think he'd be.
very close.
I think he'd be.
Is he the best in the A
the
tier then?
weakest.
Yeah,
He'd
definitely.
be the best.
Okay,
in
right, yeah,
A
yeah.
tier, or
If we're gonna
worse
do
than
that,
S.
I'm willing to compromise and say that he's the best in A tier.
Fine. I mean, I'm fine with that.
Right. One more. This is the last one.
Right.
Chairman
one.
Mao. Where does he go?
F.
F.
No.
I mean, we all know about him. So where does he go? We have a very skewed tier list, by the way. So
Yeah. Is anyone actually gonna go in F though? Like.
It's possible.
Well, I mean, some people on the list that you might think go. in
Yeah, but
F.
out of these, I doubt.
I can see some coming up that I'm gonna probably argue F for. I'm
You're
gonna put him
JFK
on.
in F. I think. would
No,
you
not
put J-
JFK. I said some
Okay.
coming up, not JFK.
Oh. Right,
No.
Mao. This is the last one we're gonna do today.
D.
Where does Mao go?
D.
B.
D. D.
D.
D. D. D. D.
D?
Yes. Once again, his power was manipulation, but he wasn't. He was once again right. Good with war. Not really good at running his own economy or running anything to do with his own country.
That's an
really.
understatement.
Yeah.
That's an understatement. Not particularly great. You know, he just ate shit and died. But hey,
I
yeah,
don't
you know,
think he's left a good legacy.
he
No,
definitely hasn't. No,
he
well, it's like-
helped. He did. They were a power to be reckoned with, military wise, but not really. If you lived there, you would probably want to kill yourself. It wasn't a
Yeah, but you can say the
pleasant.
same about Stalin.
China is still
Oh,
having
Oh
Lenin.
yeah.
like the repercussions of those problems now, and
Yeah.
it's been a long time. And,
And
he
and
didn't do a lot to fix that. Yeah, he brought reforms in the form of the People's Republic of China, of the formation of that individual state, but that didn't actually do a lot to help with the plight of the common Chinese man.
Yeah, but is that important to how he kept his leadership? Because then
Yeah.
you could argue
No support.
because we haven't made this similar argument about Lenin or Stalin.
But we have made
But
this
plenty
exact
of-
same argument about Hitler. His leadership style was flawed.
Yeah, but
he
the
was
thing is
good
with
at
Hitler-
manipulation.
The thing is with Hitler was that he was, compared to the others, like generally was incompetent. The thing is
And
with
so
Mao,
was he.
The thing is with Mao is that he
Mao was
consolidated his power.
incompetent.
He was first of all, hang on. So his rise to power, he defeated Chiang Kai-shek in an impossible war which he shouldn't have won, and then he consolidated that power and effectively suppressed any form of resistance. Then expanded China from its traditional borders and has since left a legacy where he is ethnically cleansing non-Chinese people. That is not a bad legacy if you're him. I
But
understand
that is a bad legacy. This is one that we definitely have to take an ethical standpoint for,
yeah.
because there is, I can't think of any way to justify the like that type of atrocity against people that never wanted to be ruled by his regime in the first place.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
had no
but hang on,
support.
but
We've already.
that goes with everything though. All
Yeah, but-
these people, they're all conquerors.
Yeah, we've already said that he was. We're not denying his ability to be. I've said multiple times that he made his country a military point to be reckoned with. He himself, his party, his group was a power to be reckoned with military wise. But other than that, as a leader has more points than just being able to kill a lot of people. And
No, but that's
with
not what
Hitler,
I didn't say he was. I didn't say he was good because he killed other people. What I'm saying is that he made China
Chow.
powerful under communism. Okay, and you've been saying, it's about they're a force to be reckoned with. Up until this point, China wasn't a thing that could fight Western powers. It never was. It couldn't even fight Japan
Yeah.
or India. It couldn't even do that. Right, and then when he took over, he made it a formidable power. Yes, he did fail in certain areas. He failed in Korea. He failed in Vietnam. He failed in several places. Right, I would say he failed in Korea. Yeah, right. But he made them a powerful force.
Yeah,
made
but
China
then-
powerful,
Without Mao,
did he make it
China
impossible?
wouldn't be a top 5 country.
But who was also pulling the reins? It wasn't just him.
Yeah, and then he broke
The
away.
Soviet
Are you talking about
Union.
no, he broke away from the Soviet Union because he disagreed with how communism changed under the different leaders after Stalin.
Which
And
is
when he did
fair,
that- yeah,
which
then
is
when
'cause
he
it did.
that, and then we did that, he still became an independent, strong Chinese nation.
But
Okay, I know. If we're looking at like timescales, we are set for another Chinese civil war. But the thing is, it didn't happen underneath him, and it maybe should have.
we couldn't put him higher than Stalin because Stalin's Soviet Union was pulling the strings. Without Stalin's Soviet Union, he wouldn't have been in a position to do anything that he did and made it into that power. Because it was whenever China went into a war or got involved in a conflict, Russia was pulling the strings. Well, not Russia, the Soviet
Again,
Union.
We can't put him above Stalin because of the parallels that you can draw between the lack of prosperity in these countries. Yes, they were military powers that could be influential on the political landscape, but the actual citizens of these nations were starving and they were living in terrible conditions, which, again, the repercussions of those are lasting until today. And we can't ignore that those legacies of the capacity to support violence against other countries is damaging the people that they're claiming to be trying to protect.
I'm sticking solid with a D. You can't put him above.
He's
You
not
can't
a
put
D
him.
though. He's not a D though.
You can't put him above Stalin. You just can't, and
Okay,
you
fine,
can't
I will
base his
compromise
entire
with C, but
reign.
He's not a D.
C. You should go C.
He's not a D though.
Low C.
Go on the.
Oh, not a low C. Come on.
Yeah.
Not a low C.
I think you should go.
He should go
I'd say
between
mid.
Stalin and Lincoln.
But
He needs to be below Stalin.
I would say.
Oh, wow. Yeah, sorry.
I'd say probably be below Stalin, but he'd be next to Stalin. I'd
Yeah,
say
above Henry VIII.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that.
Yeah, I'll
We
go
can
with
sort
that.
out the order of the people later, but yeah.
Well, that's the next episode, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the next one. We're
Ah,
gonna
so
redo
that was
everything.
good.
That was
so
just.
good.
Right.
We have 1 hour and 55 minutes that took us
Okay, right. Let's
That's a
wrap
long
it up really
time.
quick then. So this is our tier list.
so far. We've not
It's
had a single F.
Is it cursed? Is it cursed?
It
I
is
think.
cursed. It is cursed.
No, actually, I think we've done an alright job. I thought this
I
would be a
don't-
lot
I
more
don't think it's
cursed than
that
it would
bad.
be.
Even looking at it at a moral standpoint, it's okay.
Mm,
I mean, if you
to
shifted
be
it
fair,
down
S,
one, it'd be
S-Class is full of like imperialists, so.
yeah.
okay. Maybe not
We
looking at a
have,
moral point.
We have at number one a dictator.
What I meant was we have Hitler at the bottom. That was my
Well, not
Yeah, I
even
mean,
at the
actually, the
bottom.
further down you go, the more ruthless it gets.
Yeah.
and the more idiotic, really, especially when you get to King George.
Oh, fucking.
Well, I mean, I think
Yeah,
we did a pretty
but
good
both
job
of the people on D tier made like proper
Stupid
blunders.
moves, yeah.
They
Yeah.
weren't great decision makers.
But what's going to constitute an F? That's my
The
We
thing
will
is,
see.
a
We will
lot
see.
of them-
We'll see.
A lot of people are close. A lot of people are close. That's the problem with this.
I think Hitler. I thought about it for a while. I think Hitler is teetering on an F.
F,
I
yeah.
seriously think
Yeah,
that
Well,
he.
okay, we can't put him there yet, but
Yeah, later on.
when we inevitably have to put more people on D tier, we may have to lower him down. To
I'm
third
just
place.
saying, right? The morning of D-Day, he threw it all away, and he could have saved something. Do you know what I mean?
He could have negotiated for a start.
Gave it.
Like he
Yeah,
could have
just
negotiated the he could have held the Germany, a united Germany with Austria, and he could have said, right, I'll have Austria and Germany, just me, and we'll
And
give
we'll
all
help you
our
fight
other
the
bits.
Russians.
Yeah.
Austria is obviously not like part of Germany as the country Germany, but it is German, ethnic
Yeah.
German land.
Yeah.
I think the
Well,
Allies would be
there is-
willing to concede that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is like a considerable amount of grounds to say that Austria should be part of a united German state.
There was definitely some kind of mental illness. I would argue that it is quite possible that Hitler had probably an extreme form of ADHD.
Yeah.
I think that Hitler fits an ADHD,
Hitler had Asperger's.
but he,
Well, I guess
he
that's why.
probably
I guess that's why
did.
Hitler liked Nintendo games past the age of 9.
Yeah, he must
He was
have
all over
Asperger's.
Animal Crossing. He was like, "Oh yes, my
So
my
what, Jacob
animal
went-
like."
What would he class as?
He definitely killed the ugly animals in Animal
Yeah, the
Crossing.
ugly ones. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess the mental illness thing, fitting that Hitler and George are together then.
Right. So we'll wrap it up here then.
True.
Right, but yeah, we'll wrap it up here. We will
then, yeah.
episode 2. We will continue with the other 25 historical fees. Some interesting ones
Oh,
there. We got
God.
some philosophers, so we'll delve into that. I think that'll be quite interesting. If there are any other suggestions or whatever, please let us know.
This is
Anyone else have anything else to say?
Are we putting the
All right, then,
Discord?
lads,
Are
it
we-
is time for us to go.
Wait,
Tune in
no.
next time.